And so that's like a huge part of how I develop recipes, specifically vegetarian recipes, because I like to recreate some of those classics that people like the meaty classics that people might be missing. What are the textures that people are looking for? What are the flavors people are looking for?
Sarah has a background in food science, having completed a bachelor's in nutrition. After starting a successful food blog, Sarah then did a master's in food science, specifically sensory science, which led her to delve way deeper into how someone perceives the food that they eat. And this allowed her to unlock her creative genius with her recipes.
I consider nutrition in most of the recipes, but sometimes you just need very new chickpeas. I wanted to make it vegetarian, but to then make it also healthy, I think would sort of eliminate two of the things that kind of give it the special sauce, if you would say. I think there is a time and a place for sort of like these more decadent dinners that get you excited about flavor and cooking. It's not like I'm using that much, but just adding just a little bit sort of changes the recipe and gives it like a mouthfeel that really satisfies your brain in a way that can make you feel like you're eating something really decadent.
What you'll hear is our full conversation, which was a fantastic way to get into the brain of someone who crafts vegetarian recipes that not only taste amazing, but are quick and healthy to make too. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So, Sarah, I would love to know just a bit more about you, who you are, and what you do. So, if you could just tell me a bit, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I run the vegetarian food blog called Live, Eat, Learn. I live here in Denver, Colorado, and I work full time as a food blogger. I started it in 2015. I had just graduated from my bachelor's degree in human nutrition, and I realized that I knew like everything about health and like how to be healthy, but I knew nothing about how to cook healthy food. And so I sort of started the blog as a way of teaching myself how to cook healthy food and cook vegetarian food. And since then, it's just evolved into what is now a very large vegetarian food site. We have over 1 million readers every month coming to get our vegetarian recipes. And so, yeah, that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Nice. And I love
Yeah.
this in your backstory and kind of your history with food because it's quite different to mine in that I'm quite, I guess, scientific when it comes to food. I'm not particularly creative. And with Hurry the Food Up, all of that goes through Dave Hauker and other people who do the recipes. And to speak to someone who has much more involvement with recipe creation, who has that process, that's awesome. So I would love to just go into that in a bit more detail with you. So I would love to get inside your creative brain. So how do you, if you think of a recipe, or how do you start
Yeah.
creating a recipe?
Yeah. Sort of a few ways. So I do have a background in food science. So basically, I have my bachelor's in nutrition, but then along the way, I went to school for my master's in food science, specifically sensory science. So it's basically like most people who work in this career would be working like in the food industry, like creating products that you see in the grocery store. Um, but basically, it's how you perceive food through your senses. And so that's like a huge part of how I develop recipes, specifically vegetarian recipes, because I like to recreate some of those classics that people like the meaty classics that people might be missing. And I feel like having that food science background and that technical kind of background sort of helps guide the process of figuring out like what are the textures that people are looking for, what are the flavors people are looking for. So sort of bringing that background in really helps, but then also just sort of thinking like how can I make this recipe easier or healthier, or how can I turn it vegetarian, or basically like my three pillars of recipe development. Um, yeah, like, yeah, making it easy because my audience really likes quick and simple recipes. They don't want to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. How can I make it healthier? Because going back to my nutrition background, um, I really like foods that are functional and taste really good, but also have that nutrition element. And then, like I said, like how can I make it vegetarian if it's a classic that people are missing?
And what's the sort of workflow for this? So do you have
Yeah,
that in mind before you start? Like, you know, do you have like an idea box of all of your recipes and go, or ideas and kind of take it through? Or do you think,
yeah.
today I want to try and make a healthier version, or I want to do this? Like, what's the process there?
Well, that's a tough one because I have like I have a forever long list of like recipe inspiration, and that's coming from like I mentioned, like what are people missing? What do they want from when they used to eat meat and now they're trying to eat less? I have inspiration from traveling. Like traveling is a huge part of my life, and like the inspiration that I get from food comes from a lot of my trips. Um, but I guess like I'm thinking like technically, I'm trying to think of a recipe that I developed recently. Um, let's think. Okay, so there's like you probably don't have it over there, but here we have these like pouches. They're like a processed pouch of like lentils, and they're really good. But they're kind of expensive, and I get that people don't have them everywhere. So one thing I like to do is like take the store-bought thing or take the original thing and test it and then try and recreate it with those three pillars of easy, healthy, vegetarian. Um, and so typically, like in that case, I might just look on the back of the package or I'll see what the original ingredients are and then I'll just sort of start building up the recipe. And that's using like the food science background. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough one because it's like it depends on what the recipe is. But I also do a lot of like seasonal cooking. And so it's also like what's at the farmer's market? What do I have in my kitchen? And what kind of interesting recipe can I build that will inspire people to make a fun dinner tonight? So
So I guess it's
yeah,
kind of
it's
like a
kind of all over the
combination
map,
of,
but
yeah, and like the using those
yeah,
three pillars plus things that come into your daily life, inspiration, and then just working off that.
yeah. Just I guess like on a more not like a business level, but like so running this food blog, the purpose of my site is to like have people come read my recipes, which historically people do because they're searching something on Google. So it kind of used to be that I would see what are people searching for and I would create a recipe based on that, which obviously kind of lacks inspiration because then you're
Mm.
just making something in response to what people are looking for. And so sort of as our social media presence has grown, it's become a little more fun because I can get creative and I can actually make recipes that people have never thought of before because they are just scrolling and they're looking for inspiration. And so I'd say like in the last year, I've really made a shift away from like creating pretty basic recipes to creating some recipes that really get my fire going and get people excited. So that's been really fun just to sort of think outside the box a bit more than uh,
Than
historically
just
I've
almost
done.
following the process for Google for the sake of
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess kind of within that then, do you have recipes which you don't necessarily try and kind of fit those three pillars in around? So, I mean, I'm thinking more, I guess, the healthy one,
Hmm.
because sometimes I guess you don't necessarily just want to eat healthy food, or I guess how to phrase it, because the nutrition guidelines are there and we can say that we should follow those, but realistically, not all meals, not all recipes will necessarily fit into
Yeah.
those categories with that criteria. So do you have some which actually you kind of just experiment a bit more, you just have fun and you kind of see that as like a different sort of recipe?
Yeah, I would say so. One that I had it's very popular right now, is my Marry Me chickpeas, and it's based on the sort of viral Marry Me chicken recipe, which has chicken, but it also has a lot of cream and Parmesan. Um, and so, sort of going back to those pillars, I wanted to make it vegetarian, but to then make it also healthy, I think would sort of eliminate two of the things that kind of give it the special sauce, if you would say.
Yeah.
So I left like the cream and I left the Parmesan. So it's not necessarily like the healthiest recipe you'll ever eat, but it makes a vegetarian or vegan version of that original recipe. And so yeah, it's like I consider nutrition in most of the recipes, but sometimes you just need very me chickpeas, and you can serve it with vegetables. You can serve it with something that like balances the plate. But I think there is a time and a place for sort of like these more decadent dinners that get you excited about flavor and cooking.
One of the things I like to say is sometimes there's food for your body and food for your soul. And sometimes you need that food, which, yeah, sure, doesn't necessarily fit nicely within the guidance and might be a bit different, but
Yeah,
actually, that's totally fine. And as you say, you could pair it with something, or even on its own, it's just part of a diet. And if the general
yeah,
kind of your diet in for the most part is healthy, contains lots of fruits and veggies, the normal sort of stuff, then it kind of balances, and it's not an issue.
Yeah. Well, and also like, so I, because of my nutrition background and like just the way I grew up, I was always like not scared, but I would not use like heavy cream, like heavy whipping cream, because I just associated that with like as a bad ingredient sort of in my head. And it's really only recently that I started using it in my recipes. And it's not like I'm using that much, but just adding just a little bit sort of changes the recipe and gives it like a mouthfeel that really satisfies your brain in a way that can make you feel like you're eating something really decadent, um, while it's like not necessarily like the worst thing in the world for you. And so I've been kind of playing with that, like how can you use these sort of decadent ingredients thoughtfully and like use them in appropriate amounts where they transform the recipe without totally sabotaging whatever sort of diet or nutrition plan you're on.
And I guess that's almost a downside to having a nutrition degree, because you've got that in your head, and it's one of those
Yeah,
things that once you know it, you can't really get rid of it. So then it's in the forefront when you're creating and thinking, oh, should I, shouldn't I? And I guess
yeah,
it's hard to move away from it.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Which it's nice because then like I'm thinking about, okay, does this recipe really need 2 tablespoons of oil or does it need one? Because that's a difference of 100 calories. And so I do that where I really try to minimize like any sort of excess of ingredients, but I bring them back in thoughtfully, I would say.
And
Yeah.
I guess this kind of links into it, but with your recipes, do you end up changing things quite a lot or changing ingredients to hit nutritional targets or profiles?
Um, I would say it depends on the recipe. Um, I have been trying lately, sort of like I was saying with the oil, like to minimize it because it used to be my default. Like I would do like 2 tablespoons of oil to start the recipe, like and then saute your onion in it. And I've started in that way, sort of thinking, do we really need all of that? Can we make it 1 tablespoon and will the onion still saute fine? And then on the flip side, I know protein is like not a buzzword right now, but like I think people are really focused on it. And I'm focused on it personally. And so I'm thinking, how can I take some of these recipes that I've created and sort of give them a boost of protein? Because historically, and like I think the what a lot of people's sort of understanding of vegetarian food is that you're not going to get enough protein. And so I'm sort of trying to like fight that by adding in protein where I can, whether it be just like through like adding in some beans to like I had a zucchini ravioli a couple weeks ago. And usually I would have just done like a ricotta filling in the ravioli, but I went ahead and just mashed up some white beans and mixed that into the ricotta because you're not going to taste it, but it's going to add just a little boost of plant-based protein that it wasn't going to have before. So I am thinking like, how can I incorporate some of these plant-based proteins easily into the recipes? Yeah,
And I guess that's
yeah,
also a fun sort of experiment, right? To try and see how you can get those in there without necessarily changing or ruining it, and get all the flavors and the textures that you mentioned. And are there any particular ingredients that you love working with?
I love working with chickpeas. That's like my favorite. Unfortunately, my audience really likes that too. I have quite a few chickpea recipes on the site. And then
What is it about chickpeas?
they're just like, I just love how versatile they are. I can always have a couple cans in my pantry. Pretty much any like traditional recipe that uses chicken, I'll use chickpeas. So like I've made like a tikka masalas and like the marry me chickpeas and chickpea pot pie is really good. So yeah, I really like using that. And then I really like mushrooms. Um, like all like growing up, I never liked mushrooms. And so I thought I was a person who didn't like mushrooms until I learned how to actually cook them. And now I love them and I put them in so many things. And there's just so many types. So those are really fun to cook with too.
I think you'll have to have a chat with Dave and see if you can convince him to like them. So, I mean, I think I got it from him. I always used to hate mushrooms as well. And then gradually
Yeah,
over time, still can't do portobello mushrooms. Those are a bit too
that's
big
fair.
and
Yeah.
chunky for me.
Yeah.
But better
Have you
now.
tried oyster mushrooms though?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, so oyster mushrooms was the gateway for me because they have like a really delicate texture, and when you shred them, it can be like a pulled pork substitute, or you can
Oh,
sort
okay.
of bread them and air fry them into like a fried chicken substitute. They're amazing. I love them.
I'm gonna have to give those a try then, because we've also
Yeah.
got an air fryer which we bought maybe like 6 months ago, and I love it. It's
Yeah.
made
Yeah.
things so much easier.
Yeah. I use mine at least once a day.
Are there any ingredients that you just kind of think, or that historically you've come up against and thought, I don't know how to pair this, or I don't know how to get this into a meal?
Yeah, I'm thinking like, and this might be like fighting words for a lot of people, but like I don't, and it's not really an ingredient either, but like I don't love pasta, and so you won't see a lot of pasta on my site. Um, and I think it's like twofold, kind of going back to like the nutrition element. It's just like for me, it just feels like so many carbs, and it just makes me so tired after I eat it. But then also, like from a food science, sensory science standpoint, I just feel like it's always so homogenous. And like I would prefer my plate to have like a lot of different textures and flavors. And so pasta just does not check the box for me. And so I don't have a ton of pasta recipes on my site, which I feel like is not a good thing for a vegetarian food blogger because I know a lot of people love pasta. But
Yeah, I mean, you've probably alienated half the audience. The other
yeah.
half love you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of those people who love pasta and would eat as much of it as I could, but tend
Yeah.
not to. And I think it's probably actually one of those things that the more vegetarian food you cook, the more you understand or realize that there are so many other options out there that probably
Yeah.
are a bit more exciting, maybe have a bit more bite to them or mouthfeel or change the whole texture. And actually, when you use those, it's probably a bit more interesting for the overall dish. Have you ever had any meals or recipes that have like really infuriated you? So you've kind of got it so far, but it just doesn't quite feel good enough or doesn't feel finished, and you've had to remake it, keep testing or trying.
So I was saying earlier that my Marry Me chickpeas went like totally bonkers on social media. And so on the back of that, I decided to do like a whole Marry Me week. So I did like Marry Me mushrooms and Marry Me pasta and gnocchi. But then a lot of people were asking for a vegan version of that. And so my Marry Me dishes have like a cow's milk heavy cream and they have Parmesan. Um, but I wanted to make a vegan version. So I tried to recreate that by just using, I think it was like a vegan heavy cream, like a vegan oat based heavy cream and vegan Parmesan. And I could not get the recipe right. Just like the flavors, because sometimes with like vegan cheeses, it's just, it has like a flavor that's not spot on. And it was just driving me crazy. And the texture was making me crazy. And I tested that one so many times and I finally got it right. And it's on the site now. But um, that one was really difficult because you would think that you could just take some of these vegan alternatives and just replace them with the real thing and it's going to work. And it just was not working. And yeah, so I really, that one gave me a run for my money, but I really wanted to create a vegan version of it because the people wanted it. So we
The
got there
people
in the end.
wanted you,
But
you needed to answer.
yeah.
And what's that one called again, so people can go and look it up?
So that one is my vegan Marry Me chicken. So it takes tofu and then we freeze it and then thaw it and then press it. So then it really takes on like a chewy texture, kind of like chicken. And then we bread that. And then alongside that, we serve it with the vegan Marry Me sauce over a bed of pasta. So
Sounds
yeah,
amazing. I
which
might have to
pasta
try.
in that scenario I like because then it's like there's a lot of things going on. But yeah,
Okay, yeah. I think
yeah,
I'm gonna have to try that one as well, because my wife doesn't particularly like the. She wants tofu to be kind of like chicken. She doesn't like it if it's doesn't have a bit of texture to it or bite and
yeah,
flavor. And it sounds like this hits
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, can you get, have you heard of soy curls before? I was going to mention that when you asked about ingredients that I really
No.
liked. I think it's just one company that makes it, but they have them over here. And so anyone in the States listening should look up soy curls. They are like spot on like chicken. If you're looking for like a chicken alternative in terms of texture, it is so good. And then you can, it's sort of like tofu where you can flavor it any way you want. And so I usually will, you soak them because they're dehydrated and then you can cook them any way you want. So I'll do them in the air fryer or on the stove and then you flavor them and they're so good. So yeah, soy
Oh,
curls for
nice. I have
anyone
a
who
feel.
is
I mean, I've
craving.
never seen them here, so I have a feeling that we maybe somewhere does it. Might have to be a bit specialist, which is a shame.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also do love that about vegetarian and vegan food, how many more options there are nowadays. Like it just
Yeah.
makes the potential for trying different recipes and experimenting so much better.
Yeah. And I'll usually try and avoid like the artificial meats like the Impossibles and the Beyonds. I really like them personally, but I try to avoid them in my recipes just because I know people can't access them everywhere. But the innovations in that have become so good where if you are sort of in the camp of vegetarians who's looking for a recipe that tastes like meat, it's come so far. Which I know that there's like, I feel like a few different camps of vegetarians, and some people don't want it to taste at all like meat, and some people want the meat. So, yeah, I try and
Yeah,
make
it's funny, and
recipes for both
I
types
guess
of people.
that's a whole conversation on the side, isn't it? And how you use those sort of ones. But I agree. I
Yeah,
think it's ace. And
yeah,
with your recipes, do you think about sustainability, seasonal stuff? You mentioned seasonal earlier, that you've been doing some
yeah,
cooking like that.
yeah. So yeah, like here in the States, you can get anything any time of year, for better or for worse. But I lived in the Netherlands for 5 years when I was really starting the food blog. And so that really trained me to like buy seasonally. Because before that, I think I just like I was aware like when strawberries are in season and when tomatoes are in season, but because you can really get anything anytime, it wasn't really like seared into my brain until I moved to the Netherlands. And then it's like, oh, if you want asparagus, you have to wait until spring. And so I sort of carried that with me now because I know that I'm serving an international audience and it is more sustainable to shop seasonally. So, so yeah, I definitely try now. Yeah.
And I think personally, it always tastes better when it's fresher and you can really
Yeah.
tell.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And I'm interested. So you obviously spend a lot of time, you're full time with your food blog and spend a lot of time cooking, developing. Do you put the same sort of effort into your own cooking? Because previously, people I've spoke to who I guess are more down the cook route and that's their specific job, they hate
Yeah.
cooking. Comes to the
Yeah.
evening and they don't want to do it. They get home from work and they think, no, I'm not doing it. Do you have the same? Do you
Yeah.
love cooking at home for yourself?
I think it depends. We definitely eat well in this house. Um, but I think it's hard to say because our fridge just always has recipe experiments in it. So I would say that like I'll never spend more than 20 minutes cooking dinner because I am so tired of standing in the kitchen. But it's very rare that we like will order takeout or something because it just pains me because I know that we can make something really good here. So yeah, I don't make like elaborate dinners for us typically unless it's like Thanksgiving or Christmas, and then like I'm the one who's making everything because I love hosting and serving people. But yeah, day to day dinner is either going to be leftovers from recipe testing and shooting, or it's going to be something quick, or it's going to be like I'm just developing a recipe that I'm going to shoot this week. So yeah, it's kind of yeah,
It's a funny sort of paradox, isn't it? So my wife and I had
yeah,
this chat the other day, and I am nowhere near the sort of level or cook that it sounds like you are and from your recipes and everything that you've done. But we had this discussion thinking we're all right at cooking, you know. We can make some really tasty dishes and really enjoy it. And then you do think of takeaways and or even eating out. And unless you are then going for something that's quite expensive and really kind of going somewhere where you know you're going to love, you kind of have that feeling of like, is it really worth it?
yeah,
And
yeah. I've been like lately, not lately, but I guess like when I was creating my cookbook a few months ago, it was like the longest days, like wake up super early, go to bed late. And I told myself, I'm working so hard, so I'm going to treat myself and I'm going to order takeout every day this week. But then, like, dinner time would come around and I just couldn't bring myself to do it because I'm like, it's $45 for one meal because all these fees. And then it's not even going to be that good. And it's going to be a small portion because, like, and so then I just ended up not getting takeout at all that week, even though I had promised myself that because I thought that was like a reward. But like really, that was not a reward for me because it just stresses me out. Yeah.
so weird. And this is actually
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I love helping people eat better generally, because I think once
Hmm.
people realize what they can do in their own kitchen or how good food can make them feel, they
Yeah.
don't really want to go back because they realize what's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just like giving people the education and like the inspiration to know that they can do it in their kitchen, yeah, it's like really rewarding because you don't need to order takeout. You can make the same thing at home. It's going to be better. It's going to be ready before the delivery driver would have got to your house, and you're going to save a ton of money.
And do you have a particular comfort food that you make or like recipe that you love doing for yourself?
Mm, right now, it's my a tomato sandwich, which sounds like not
Okay.
a comfort food, but um, there's a like a bodega sandwich place nearby to us, and they have like these specialty sandwiches. And last summer they had this tomato sandwich with like garlic bread on the outsides, and then Wursten cheese, and then like big slabs of heirloom tomatoes. And it's all toasted, so it's all warm and gooey. And so I spent the whole last summer trying to recreate it, and then I finally like got it right, and now that's my summer comfort food because it's so good. And so then I just
Nice.
recently learned how to make Wursten cheese because that's quite expensive here. I remember when I was in the Netherlands, it was like a pretty affordable thing, but here it's like a specialty. Um, so I learned how to make that, so now I can make as many tomato sandwiches as I want.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
that's what you have instead of your takeouts.
Yep. Yeah. My homemade Wursten cheese.
And you're obviously in the kitchen a lot. You're cooking,
Mhm.
creating recipes. How do you avoid burnout when you're doing this day in, day out? Because a lot of work must go into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of work. I would say so like at the beginning of the week, I'll sort of generally write out what I want my week to look like and like the recipes that I want to work on and sort of develop and shoot. And sometimes so last week there was a recipe that I just kept bumping, like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And then I realized if I've pushed it off 3 days in a row, I'm not excited about this recipe, so I shouldn't do it. So I didn't used to do that, sort of going back to like when we were talking about the old days where you would sort of write for Google and create recipes for Google. It sort of like took the inspiration out of it. And so I've come to terms now with if I'm not inspired by a recipe, then I just shouldn't make it because then it's going to be really hard for me to pretend like I'm excited about it, and then my audience isn't going to be excited about it. So definitely like starting with that, like having the inspiration for it. And then I have a lot of help on the site. So like my job is like creation, like I create the recipes and I'll do like the photography and the videography, but I have people helping me with writing and social media and project management and search engine optimization with the Google. So I do have help with sort of the more draining tasks that aren't quite as creative.
That allows you to be then focus on your bit that you do really well, that you enjoy,
Yeah.
and can actually spend the time there without all the other stuff taking it away and feeling like, I don't know, you have to get this recipe right now. And I guess it just that's the sort of thing that saps the fun out of it.
Yeah. Like when I have time, when I know that I have time to really develop the recipe, um, and when I know that I don't have to do those soul sucking tasks that I don't like, but someone else might actually really like if everyone can be in a position of doing something that they're good at and they love, that's when it works. And so, yeah, having help has really been uh, very useful in preventing burnout.
Nice. Well, that's the way to do it and
Yeah.
do it sustainably, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And with cooking, I guess you've probably encountered some more challenging scenarios. And are there any particular memorable mishaps that you've had when cooking? And what have you learned from it?
I have one that's not necessarily like a vegetarian like dinner sort of recipe, but um, in 2019, I came out with a popsicle cookbook, and so it was 75 popsicle recipes, which is a lot of popsicle recipes to have to come up with because
Yeah.
you can only think of like 5 flavors if you're just thinking of it. But um, so the idea was that I was going to do popsicles from A to Z, and I was going to have like just a whole rainbow of popsicles. And so I had an idea for this popsicle that uh, would use like the natural compounds in like purple fruits and veggies. So when you add something acidic to something purple, like a cabbage, let's say, if you add something acidic, it makes it bright magenta. So my idea was that we were going to make a fun purple popsicle, and then when you would like mix it into like a lemonade, it would like magically turn into like a magenta thing. So it'd be like a magic popsicle. But I could not think of anything that was purple that wasn't cabbage or beets. And so I was like, well, I think a cabbage popsicle could work. And a cabbage popsicle does not work. Like I tried so hard to make a cabbage popsicle taste good, but like the idea was there, but that one did not make it into the
The
book and I tried
execution
really
didn't
hard.
didn't quite follow
No.
through. So your audience, you've got a variety of people, some who are probably really new to cooking, some who are quite experienced. But if someone was new to vegetarian cooking, can you give any tips for them?
Yeah. So I would say number one, variety is really important. And so sort of like I would recommend trying a new recipe every week, like a totally new recipe. And that could just be one recipe a week. Like Meatless Monday, I know is a really big thing. It's just on Mondays you try something totally new. I think that can really help introduce you to new flavors and ingredients and methods of cooking that you haven't tried before. And then as you sort of get this Rolodex of recipes, you'll start to learn what you like and what you don't like, and you'll become more confident in what you're cooking and what you know you like. So I would say definitely try new things, basically. Um, and then if you are just starting out with vegetarian cooking, I know a mistake that I made in the very beginning back in college when I was really like experimenting with being vegetarian and eating less meat is I wasn't paying attention to proteins and specifically complete proteins. And so I'd recommend if you're really new to this, just give it a Google what complete proteins are. It's basically proteins where you're getting all of the essential amino acids. So, like when you're eating meat or dairy products, you're getting all of the essential amino acids that your body needs. But when you're eating a plant based diet, let's say you're eating like beans, that's only going to give you some of those essential amino acids. So you have to pair it with another ingredient that will complete that and give you all of them. And so there's a lot of ideas like beans and rice is a common complete protein, or hummus and pita bread is a common complete protein. And so I would say just do a little research on that. Like if you just look it up, there's going to be a lot of ideas for how to pair those two things. But when I finally learned how to sort of pair different ingredients in a way that would sort of complete the protein profile, it not only like helped guide my meals because then it made it really easy to think of what ingredients I should put on the plate because it then you can really easily see like what should go together, kind of like a puzzle almost. And then it also just gave me a lot more energy and I started feeling a lot better once I had like that rounded protein profile. So yeah.
I like that as a framework for experimenting because it almost gives
Yeah.
you those pairings without needing to think in it. And then that kind of goes, well, you could use that as an example, see what you can make from it. And then it kind of gives you that structure to follow.
Yeah, gives you the framework for what the meal should look like. Like, and beans and rice is a really common one. So it's like, okay, well, I need a recipe that has them together, or like I need a bean recipe and I need some sort of rice dish. And it's like, it really helps sort of give you guidance because it's hard to know what to make for dinner when like you can make anything. And so if you
Yeah.
just have like a basis for what it should contain, then yeah, it makes it a lot easier.
And I think it's especially true if you are new to cooking or trying to be vegetarian or following a
Yeah.
vegetarian diet. It's overwhelming, really. And I think you
Yeah.
mentioned already that trying one new recipe a week is a really nice way to kind of ease into it without feeling overwhelmed and like there's too much. But
Yeah.
also, I guess one area that you specialize in, which I'm sure people would love to hear about, is are there any particularly easy swaps which you would recommend for making traditional recipes vegetarian?
Yeah. Um, I think it depends on sort of what camp of vegetarian you fall into. So if you are looking for something that sort of tastes like your old meat alternatives, like I was saying, the meat like the alternative meat industry has come really far. So like you can get a really good spicy Italian sausage replica if you want to. So if you want to do that, like those are super easy swaps that are just as simple as replacing the ground beef with that. If you're not wanting it to taste like meat and you're looking for something that's more highlighting the vegetables or the vegetarian ingredients, I love chickpeas and I add them to everything. Um, and then
The
sort of like we
chickpea
were saying with
queen.
the soy curls, yeah, love chickpeas. But yeah, people are sleeping on soy curls. Um, in the US, they're available on Amazon pretty affordably, but those can really easily be swapped um, and flavored any way you want. So I would say those three things are like the easiest ways and my go-tos. And then sort of like the next level would be mushrooms because there's just so many different types of mushrooms that can replicate so many different types of textures and flavors. And then naturally they have like a really savory umami kind of taste. And so those would be like probably the next level that I would try once I was comfortable cooking vegetarian.
This is probably a really nice way to finish and talk about this. You mentioned this earlier, but we talked off air about it. So you've just had a cookbook come out, haven't you? Can you tell us a
Yeah.
bit more about it?
Yeah, so I just released my cookbook. It's called Eat, and it's over 100 vegetarian recipes. Um, this is it's self-published, so instead of working with a traditional book publisher, I wrote and designed and found a printer and had it all shipped to my house. So there's currently like 1,000 books in our garage on a shelf. um, and so we're doing all the fulfilling and shipping and everything, but it's been really fun. And we're selling them really quickly. So I'm looking at having um, another print run done and shipped to us. So that should take a few months to get to us. But yeah, it's basically the book is basically 100 recipes that our readers have loved over the last 10 years of food blogging. So I was really trying to create something that was an inspiration for people looking to get easy, nutritious meals on the table. So for the most part, it's dinners and lunches. And then there's like the breakfast chapter is like a choose your adventure. So there's like 5 adventures, like overnight oats and smoothies and omelets. And then within each of those adventures, there's a bunch of different flavor options. So yeah, it's just like
Nice.
a
That sounds
fun
fun.
physical form of like everything I've been creating for the last decade online. So yeah,
Amazing. And so, where can people
yeah.
find that? Where could they buy it? Where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, so the book is available on my website, which is liveeatlearn.com. And then if you go to the menu bar, there's just a section that says cookbook and you can buy it there.
Awesome.
Cool.
And I will put a link in the show notes to your website and so
Awesome.
people can find it as well. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much for coming on and chatting with me. Amazing to hear
Yeah.
about your creative process and your experience. So, this has
Yeah.
been awesome.
Yeah, this is really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Sarah.